ahead and get started. Other people will be coming in as time goes on. The first thing on the agenda is going to be the academic performance framework. The second thing is going to be balanced literacy and the K-2 emergent literacy plan. And then we will have an opportunity to ask questions about the information that was presented at the last time we discussed literacy at the board meeting, which was several months ago, about 4 months ago, on the particular reading assessments that were passed out at the board retreat on Friday. So right now we'll turn it over to Paul Changas.
I know the first agenda item is to talk about the academic performance framework, and I have some information regarding the framework that we've used in the past. The framework was in place through 2015. At that point, the state changed its academic standards. Basically, what we defined as proficiency on state exams changed. There were changes in the value-added assessment targets at that time. But the bottom line is that at that point, the framework was no longer in place. The Tennessee Department of Education started using its own metrics for evaluating school performance, which had some similarities to the academic performance framework. It looked at achievement, growth, college readiness, and a variety of measures to assign letter grades to schools, whereas we had been assigning schools to 1 of 5 different levels in terms of performance. And we felt that it was going to be confusing at best to stakeholders for us to assign our own grades on schools or scores when the Tennessee Department of Education was assigning theirs. If we were to, and if you want information on the framework we had in the past, we can certainly have that passed out. The question for us would be, do we want to continue to develop a new academic performance framework? If you recall, when we developed the first one around 2013, we looked at, we involved board members in the discussion, principals, community stakeholders, the Chamber of Commerce was involved. We spoke to teachers, parents, and at first you have to identify what you value in terms of those metrics. We had achievement growth measures, college readiness. We also had some survey data, school culture measures. The surveys have changed, the assessments have changed. It would take us months to develop a new framework if that's what we want to go to. But I do know that the Tennessee Department of Education now has their own grading scale. It's a 0 to 4 scale, which may become a numeric grading scale in the future. Then the question is, do we want to continue building a framework when we're going to be publicly identifying schools by the Department of Education in terms of performance? And I know, Ms. Spearing, you had some questions around some of the metrics that we had, because we did not break the data down by subject area before. We had success rates that were across reading, language, and reading, language, science, mathematics, and science, not social studies before. But we did not have a breakdown by specific subject area. Would it be helpful to see examples of, I don't know how much you remember the framework before, but I have some examples of what we had in the past, if that would be helpful.
One of the things we are asked often as board members is the question, how many of our students are reading at grade level? And we don't have an answer. And we don't know, we've asked the question on the board floor, we haven't received an answer. How do we, what is your recommendation on how to, where is that information accessible?
So we'll go into some slides with that recommendation, and we can provide data by school and grade level using this definition. But one thing I will say, in the previous academic performance framework, we did not have a grade level. We did not define a result as on grade level. Again, it was across subject areas, and it was using the state's performance on TCAP and 10 Ready, essentially at that point. So our recommended definition, and I've said this on the board floor before, there's not a universal definition of being on grade level. We've used different definitions at different times. The one that makes sense to us would be students at the fifth stay nine being the national average, taking into account a little bit of measurement error, which corresponds to the 40th percentile or higher on our universal screeners, which that would be FAST assessment at K and 1, MAP assessment above that. And that 40th percentile or higher is what the state defines as being low risk on reading assessments and not having a need to do any further skills assessment. So we're essentially talking about students at the national average or higher. If we were to use the 10 Ready, and I've seen that TCAP 10 Ready definition used in some places as a metric. If we were to go that route, it means every state has its own definition of what it means to be on grade level. We would prefer to use a national assessment to guide that, so for comparison purposes.
So Paul, what was on the academic performance framework before that we are not, you have given us information about 10 Ready.
So let me bring some examples of that. There's a general handout, and then there's a couple of examples for the school. So there's a general outline of what was in the a summary sheet in terms of what was in the academic performance framework. But we also have the color-coded sheets are the actual results, if you want to pass a couple of those around, David. So what we had in there before was proficiency on TCAP, but that was using a different standard from 2015 and prior years. The state made adjustments when 10 Ready came into place in 2016. But that is mastery of state standards versus what we would typically consider being on grade level in terms of reading or math performance. Tennessee has set a very high bar on 10 Ready, as you know, that's comparable to a 21 on the ACT, which is a college readiness standard. And statewide, there's about 35 to 40% of students, depending on the grade level, who are hitting that target. But there are also a lot of students who are getting admitted to college with less than a 21 on the ACT and would be typically considered in pretty much every other state as being on grade level, just not necessarily exactly where they need to be college and career ready. Some of those students would need some remedial courses, but they have basic reading skills. They don't have some of the mastery of standards. But we, again, with the academic performance framework, the goal was to get an overall picture of school performance, and we had an achievement measure, a measure for growth, and other metrics, but we didn't break it down by subject area. It was more general. So if it's indeed looking at on-grade level performance, we can provide right away data by school in terms of the percent of students meeting this definition by grade, by school.
Okay. So there's not really another type of framework to replace this at this point, since the standards changed and since the assessment changed?
So no, there's not on our part. What we've done is accept what the state is doing at this time, and the decision internally was, let's see what when we stop doing this. The state told us they were going to be doing something similar to what we had with the academic performance framework. We actually provided our framework and our documentation to the accountability staff at the state at that point. There were some things that they liked about it and have incorporated in what the state's doing. They've also done some things a little differently. But in essence, we didn't want two sets of books. We didn't want to say a school is at a high achieving level if the state was not going to come out publicly with something similar. If we were to develop our own document, it would probably be something we would want to use internally for our own decision making rather than a public-facing document that's going to contradict what the Tennessee Department of Education is saying. But again, if we're going to go that route, I would want to get input from different stakeholders. What is it we truly value? And not necessarily the easiest thing to measure, which is typically multiple choice test scores. If we want to include social emotional learning measures, survey data, other factors, I would incorporate those as well.
Anyone want to, yeah, Amy?
So I am concerned about creating more rankings of schools for obvious reasons because of the lack of reliability on testing, and even when you're looking at value added, there are all kinds of problems with that. And I'm concerned about the direction the state's moving, and now we have these, A, B, C, D, F grades, and so I just hate to create something that is, again, going to be, that's going to, that will have problems with reliability, but that will be sort of accepted as, this is the be-all, end-all. And, but, so that's my concern. I brought this up before, and before we had this academic performance framework, we had the scorecard, which again, I don't like the title scorecard, but what I liked about that database was that you could search it, and look at factors like socioeconomics and diversity, and so you could get I thought sort of a clear picture of the school and the types of populations that the school's serving and those kinds of things, and compare more fairly. But then I don't think the average parent understands the impact of socioeconomics on the test scores. And then if we're really focusing on equity, are we creating something that will cause problems with, create more inequities because parents are going to be trying to steer away from some schools based on whatever this ranking is that we're giving them. So those are my concerns.
If I could just speak to that briefly, when we developed that framework, the intent was not for it to be a public document as it became. It was to help guide some of, when you start pulling all the data that we have available to us, it gets overwhelming. And the intent was to look at an overall picture for our own internal decision-making, but as one factor to consider when, and taking into account achievement, growth, school culture, et cetera. But it became much more than that. We do, on the results, and including what I handed out, at the very end, we shared some demographic data, and at different times, one of the goals we hoped was to look for schools with, and we did some reporting to the board, high poverty schools that had good scores, schools with high percentages of English learners. Where can we use it to find schools that are more comparable? Because we know it's not a level playing field. And it would be my recommendation, if we were to do anything, that we use it more for that kind of purpose to identify what I call the true gems, the schools that don't always get recognition but are doing well, and not another scorecard, because we have I think plenty of those already.
Yeah, and I was thinking like the benefit of something like that for me would be so a parent could look at options. But again, I just think we have to reevaluate if we're really going to focus on equity, the sort of choice, the pushing, creating these options that, like you said, are not fair comparisons, and pushing parents away from some schools is not the way we want to go. We really want to try to create equity system-wide, and I'm concerned that these rankings and searches that parents aren't as informed. I mean, I wasn't informed before I got on the board when they're looking at these lists, so that's my concern. But I could see a benefit of maybe having something like that the public could look at and have maybe a little more fair comparison. But I like the direction you're going in creating some sort of internal document that we can use in our work and assess and have a bigger, a clearer picture, a bigger picture overall of the school. Maybe that's the way to go.
And I'll just add, I was speaking to a group at the chamber, part of the report card committee this morning, and in the past, they've relied on a lot of that kind of information and did seat analyses, which I was never comfortable with. And I shared some data today with them of students who were in schools that we would identify as priority schools, low-performing schools, who have made exceptional growth. And to make the assumption that every child in a seat in one of those schools is not doing well is a very unfair, or that teachers are not effective in those buildings. So there are a lot of potential misuses when we make it too easy to categorize schools. So again, we want to use it to identify what are the models that we should use for other schools with similar demographics.
And would you say that having some type of academic performance framework that we used internally to make decisions about how to move forward, would you say that is something that would be beneficial to the district?
I would want a broader conversation with our director and leadership, and I think there's potential value in that. But again, we've identified key performance indicators that we're tracking. The state has identified metrics. I think we need to reach some consensus on what those measures are, how we would weight those in order to move forward. I would not want it to be one person's decision by any means. I'll also say that we probably want to take a closer look at what the state is using and what they've identified and see what parts we're comfortable with and what parts we're not. And if I were truly comfortable with what the state was doing, I would rely on that. But there's some things I would do differently too.
Any other comments or questions?
If I could just add something real quick, I think it's important to remember that anything we would create for internal use that might rank order schools or some type of results would not be solely an internal document. I mean, it would be a publicly available document. So there's at least that consideration as part of the discussion.
Yes.
Well, do you know when the state is going to release whatever they're going to use as far as scorecard rankings, et cetera, for individual schools? I know they've delayed it maybe more than once. Do you know when they're planning to do that?
Well, they have given us scores on a 0 to 4 scale for schools for this year. They delayed assigning a letter grade this year. Supposedly that's going to happen next year, but I understand that's under consideration as well. I'll just say that that data, they have not published this on their report card side. I'm anticipating that'll come in November. We certainly have that data available to us. It's not the most transparent system to interpret. We've been working with our principals this fall and had a lot of small group and individual meetings with principals to go through their data. But I think sometime in November those will be available publicly. But again, we have pushed back on the idea of having a letter grade as well, and we're not the only district that shared that concern with the state.
I have a question. Thank you.
Dr. Changas, the letter grade assigning, I've been, trying to keep up with that, and I think I personally think it's controversial. Is it similar to what you were just speaking about in the seating that the chamber was talking about, the report card committee was talking about?
Well, it's a little different. What the chamber was doing was looking at all of the schools that were in the lowest performance category and looking at the enrollment of those schools and basically saying what percentage of our seats in the district were low-performing seats. But that's making the assumption that every student in that school is at the same place, which we know is not the case. What the state is doing, they are looking at multiple measures. The question becomes, are we looking at the right measures? Are we emphasizing growth sufficiently? The state initially was putting a higher percentage of weight on academic growth rather than one-time measures of achievement, which are highly correlated with socioeconomics. In the end, they increased the percentage on achievement, which to me, it becomes a fairness issue. Things that are highly correlated with socioeconomics and outside of our control, I would not, there's still a place for them, but I would not put as much weight as the state has.
And the reasoning behind that the state has behind the assignment of letter grades, what would they use that information for?
Well, so they will be, if indeed they go the route they're supposed to, that'll be published on their state report card site. And, how it's going to be used, we will have realtors and we will have parents looking at that and potentially making that part of their choice decision. The U.S. Department of Education did not require states to assign letter grades. Tennessee made that decision. But again, we're hoping that they will reconsider again in the future.
Thank you.
Amy?
I'll just say that this is all part of privatization, is the ranking of schools and all. I mean, that's really what it's about. But I hope that you can help steer the chamber and other groups like that away from this I thought we're finally past the high quality seat conversation, which is just utterly meaningless because you're talking about children and whatever needs they're bringing into schools, and so it's not about this non-human seat that's there. That's always just irked me, and I think the rankings. I mean, this is again, we're not having conversations about what the children are bringing to school with them, what they need, the traumas they faced. And when you talk about school choice, there's an article that came out today that said school choice is causing more segregation. The choice argument, which is all part of the school privatization and charters and vouchers and all this, it is causing greater inequities in the system. That's the problem for me with all of those conversations, is that we are creating greater inequities rather than trying to repair that. And there are proven solutions that will help address some of the achievement gaps, which would be the increasing socioeconomic diversity in schools and increasing or desegregating our schools, those kinds of things. And we're moving away from that with all this high quality choice conversation that we keep having. So
I will just add, in the past week, I've had the opportunity, along with probably 8 or 10 other people from across the state, to share in a meeting and then today in a phone conference call follow-up with State Department accountability staff, and we're talking about some new staff members, concerns and questions we have with regard to some potential changes in accountability. Especially the idea of moving more toward one-time measures of achievement that don't factor in the idea that schools have students coming in at very different places. And we have shared concerns very vocally. Tina Stinson and I were both on the call from Davidson County. Hamilton County, Knox County have been very vocal too, that we don't want to move backwards in terms of how we look at this. And I've raised the concern that the challenges we have when we put a failing grade on a school make it harder for us to keep good people in the schools where we need them most.
So I do know that there is an equity coalition that's been traveling around the state to kind of spread awareness about this letter grade, to try to, I think, advocate against it. To be fair, I don't think any school district has been a part of it, but have you heard anything about that? Is that something that MNPS can participate in so that we can lend our voice to the conversation?
I don't know if the district is. I have not. I've heard of the coalition. I have not heard anything directly in terms of our involvement. But we were one of the districts that was called on by accountability staff, and we in the past we had served as kind of a workforce to bounce ideas off of. The state was ready to make some immediate changes in accountability, even though we're over a quarter of the year into this school year, and have backed off of that idea. But they're looking at some significant changes in the future that we've pushed back, and said we need further analysis. But I don't know if we'll have other opportunities, but I can assure you that we'll take advantage in our assessment office every chance we have to, and we're putting some things in writing as well. I also know that the districts that were on that call are jointly putting our concerns in writing.
But how can the board help you? How can we use our political power, our social media following, all of that to?
So we'll keep you posted. I said earlier this fall when we reported some of our accountability data, where we could use the support, and I'm not sure the best venue for that, but any effort that will support the idea that the focus be on growth, rather, and not necessarily just value added, but progress measures rather than measures that we know. I said this to the state accountability people. I was at the state over 20 years ago. I was in charge of the state report card at that time when we were using one-time measures of achievement, national rankings that were almost equivalent from year to year. The same schools were always at the top, the same schools at the bottom, because it was measuring factors outside of the control of schools. That would be a regressive approach if we were to go back to that direction.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Paul, thank you for the update. Okay, and I'll ask David to come. David, we're going to hear from you about the K-2 Emergent Literacy Plan, as well as balanced literacy. And also, David, while you may want to just briefly go over this in case there's any questions that board members might have.
Sure. Thanks, Ms. Spearing, members of the board. Before I move slides, is there any other conversation or discussion around this definition as it appears on the screen? Is that satisfactory to move forward with? So, for example, Ms. Spearing, your specific question of when board members are asked the very pointed question, what % of our kids are reading at grade level? Given this definition, we can then provide you with a very accurate number.
This is referencing the universal screener, and the universal screener uses passages like paragraphs, is that right? As well as MAP uses paragraphs, short passages. We're not using right now text level assessments, which is a whole book, which gives us more information about how a child is performing at text at their grade level. And we used to collect that as a district, and that was extremely eye-opening in terms of looking at our schools and our grade levels across the district to see where what classrooms were making progress and where there might need to be more support given at that school.
Right.
So when we had that assessment, I felt like I had a better answer for our people when the community asked those questions, rather than on a given passage, how well is the child performing, but how is the child performing over time on text, on whole text, beginning to end. So those are my concerns.
Sure. And I would just say that with the text level assessments, when we had our assessment task force a few years ago, one of the priorities was to minimize the number of required assessments that are given. And so to be clear, TLAs are still optionally administered. Schools can certainly choose to do that. We also know that when you require something, you induce other behaviors that are not certainly desirable. So we can continue this conversation, and that was part of the assessment document that we provided you to provide answers, but it was decided a few years ago because we were trying to minimize, so the screeners that we have to give are required by the state. And so we have to make choices. If we're going to do both, then we were getting lots of complaints about the numbers of required assessments, and we really wanted to minimize what was required by the state and the district.
Let me just respond to that, because I recall also that when we were using the TLA, the text level assessments, that teachers said that they reported that that was the most beneficial assessment that they administered.
Yeah, and again, so to be clear, you know, my understanding of the purpose of the TLA is for a teacher to observe his or her students' reading behaviors, right? And so because it's intended to be a classroom assessment, we wanted to put it back in the classroom for its intended purpose, instead of making it a district mandated assessment that, again, can potentially induce undesirable behaviors.
Well, I'd be concerned about using undesirable behaviors, but there's a difference, too, between TLAs and running records.
Sure, yes, ma'am.
So anyway, that was my concern.
Great, okay,
Yeah.
sure, yes, ma'am. So, but thank you for the opportunity to come. I know that, Ms. Spearing, you had emailed some questions last week to form the agenda, and we have the agenda, and this is slightly different than the email you had sent, so we have prepared a response to your email last week, and I've got Aaliyah Washington-Smith. She's our interim director of elementary literacy, and we've put together a bit of a presentation to share with you all in response to some of those items. And can I operate this from here? Okay, great, we'll move forward. So we think that it's important, and I want to be clear also that we understand you have a hard stop at 4:30, is that correct?
We do, yes.
Yes, ma'am. So we'll try to move quickly, Ms. Spearing, and if there are things that we need to come back to at a later time, we'll be happy to do that, okay? So we want to ground our conversation in our vision of proficient reading. And we think this is where we need to start when we're talking about elementary literacy. And we want to be clear that it's about students making meaning from text. And they can build and share their growing and accumulating knowledge about themselves, others, and the world. And we think that's important when they engage in dialogic conversations with their peers and their teachers. Several components of reading must work together in tandem for us to achieve the goal of proficient reading. But we want to make sure that we're staying grounded in the idea that the goal is to make meaning from print and from text. So we want to be clear that this document is from the State Department. This was published April 9th, 2018. And this is included in the Teaching Literacy in Tennessee document. And there was a series of publications that the State Department listed over the last few years. This is very clear in that document that these are the components of a literacy block. And we have just adopted this, and we see that this makes up our balanced literacy framework for Metro. So included in here, you can see that there's reading and writing development, and this becomes the framework and the structure by which teachers teach the ELA standards. We believe that the primary goal of literacy instruction is, again, to develop authentic, proficient readers, writers, and thinkers who can independently make meaning of text. And so you can see going from left to right in both the reading, the blue reading, and then the green writing. The idea is that there is a continuum of scaffolded support away from being teacher-focused to being student-centered, because the idea is we want to matriculate independent readers and writers who can communicate independently. We think that they're best positioned to participate in civic life and be successful in college and careers. So these components of balanced literacy really have a balance of skills and knowledge with both foundational skills where students are required to make meaning, and balance that with reading and writing with whole group and small group instruction. The balance of direct instruction with student-centered instruction. So this graphic, again, taken from the Tennessee Department of Education, Teaching and Literacy really represents the balanced literacy framework that we also use in Metro schools. And again, we want to be really clear that we are a balanced literacy framework, and we appreciate the questions and concerns that have been raised so that we can include this in all of our professional development, whether that's at the teacher level, for the central office staff, and our Leading for Literacy teams that come to our curriculum instruction update meetings.
So the speaking and listening standards are continually integrated throughout the balanced literacy framework. The balanced literacy framework is also based on a gradual release of responsibility model that gradually releases responsibility for literacy tasks onto students so that they can grow in their independence on specific literacy tasks. And of course, that's the goal of all of our literacy instruction. This graphic, of course, also represents what was outlined in our MNPS Tier 1 literacy framework. And that specific document was shared with principals, teachers, and coaches in September of this year. So the balanced literacy framework is embedded in a number of our district documents and structures and of course, our resources. The Tier 1 Balanced Literacy Framework, as well as our scope and sequence documents, all entail how texts of varying purposes and types should be used across the framework in order to support students' literacy development. So this is just a quick example of some texts that are noted in our scope and sequence document that are used for interactive read-alouds, close reads, and for shared reading. Our scope and sequence document actually details which items or which texts are used for interactive read-alouds, close reads, and shared reading opportunities. Our culminating tasks and daily tasks also provide opportunities for students to write in response to these complex texts.
And I'll just add that in 2017, we redesigned our scope and sequence so that it was designed more around connected text sets that allowed teachers to help students build knowledge as they progress through the units. And so we tried to design some tight, coherent units that would be intended to be knowledge building. And this was to really align with, again, a lot of the State Department's guidance in those documents that they began releasing in 2016. And we also know that we wanted to set a strong foundation as we prepared for implementation of ELA materials next year. P.S. Those documents are publicly available. That was something that in my previous role I was very intentional about, making sure that those documents were publicly accessible. So anybody in the world, including you all, of course, if you just go to ci.mnps.org, you can find our ELA scope and sequence documents in about 4 clicks. So as we shared, Ms. Spearing referenced the July 9th board presentation where we shared our 2019-20 instructional priorities for the year. And these are based on a couple of things. First of all, we shared with you all some FastBridge data that showed the risk levels of our students, and we shared the most recent results at the time we had were from May of 2019. And we talked about the strong correlation between students who are at high risk for being behind grade level and then their likelihood of being on track by the time to get to 3rd grade, and there's a 4% chance. So looking at the data, we know we have to back up from the state assessment accountability data that we are generating from those T and Ready assessments and really look at what is the underlying factor or potentially root cause of some of that data. And so we looked at our FastBridge data, our MAP data. We also have feedback from principals, teachers, and coaches who have requested more support in these 3 specific areas. So we want to make sure that as we talk about foundational skills, for example, number 3, that we're very clear that these are not to be taught in isolation.
So in October, we provided professional development about best practices and foundational skills instruction. So foundational skills lessons should provide regular opportunities for students to practice those skills in the context of real reading and writing experiences. So if a teacher has 120 minutes dedicated to literacy instruction, only about 25% of their block should be devoted to foundational skills. And whenever possible, across that literacy block, teachers should make connections between those foundational skills that are taught and the reading of any other text throughout the literacy block, so that those connections can model for students how real readers and writers use the information that they're learning about letters and sounds to make meaning from text. In August, we provided professional development during the curriculum and instruction update meeting around text-based planning. Specifically, we explored how to plan interactive read-alouds and the shared reading components of the balanced literacy framework. Many of our MNPS schools and teacher teams engage in collaborative text-based planning of their whole group instruction by planning text-dependent questions, daily tasks, and academic conversations.
So in support of those three instructional priorities that Aaliyah just outlined, and again, part of what we wanted to do here was to give you an update. We said that's what we're going to do in July, and so far in August and October at our curriculum instruction update meetings that are attended by our Leading for Literacy teams, which is composed of the principal, the literacy coach, and by the way, we're going to go in a different direction to change LTDS to literacy coach, just to be clear. So we'll have to make sure we get that language out front and center, and I know people have to change their LinkedIn profiles now, but that's okay. But we're gonna, because every time somebody says, what's an LTDS, what do I say? It's a literacy coach. So let's just be literacy coach. But those CIUMs are attended by the school's executive principal, the literacy coach, and then a team that's selected by the principal that might include the librarian, it might include a lead teacher, for example. We say around 4 to 5 members. So in all of our professional learning, Aaliyah just outlined how we have tried to get at some of those components that we share with you in July. But these three components really make up the learning ecosystem that we have been trying to design and implement so that we can get at some of the pieces that we have identified need support. So professional development, and again, Aaliyah talked about the curriculum instruction update meeting. So far this year, we've got 2 more that will be literacy focused. We also have, of course, teacher-selected PD. We're going to share with you some of what that looks like. And then also there's, of course, content and coach days that our literacy coaches attend. The school-level literacy supports there in the yellow, so we know that the literacy department actually has the capacity to provide in-school support, so they can go in and facilitate or co-facilitate text-based planning that we've talked about, following the protocol that we had provided. They can go in and do some model lessons. They could come in and do some observations and coaching, give feedback, and of course, they work to support the inquiry cycle. And then the instructional resources, we've talked about the scope and sequence that we have redesigned. We have provided those anchor texts that we talked about to the schools at a 1-to-1 ratio for every teacher. We've designed some exemplar lessons that includes lesson sequences that scaffold up to the daily task. And those daily tasks are intended to support the culminating tasks that we, again, have identified in the scope and sequence through those units so that they're clear in their goals and purpose. So those are the 3 areas that we have identified that we're moving on in support of these 3 instructional priorities.
So we continue to provide direct professional development to teachers on a self-selected basis. The literacy sessions offered during the summer and fall directly support the implementation of balanced literacy with sessions such as small group reading instruction, balancing balanced literacy, intentional planning using the revised scope and sequence, and text-level assessment training. We will continue to provide professional development in the priority areas and prepare for implementation of the new ELA instructional materials. So each spring, we request volunteers, teachers, and coaches to submit proposals to present professional development sessions of their choosing. Those sessions were added to the summer and fall professional development catalog. We plan to request volunteers again in the spring of 2020 using the same process. During the school year, educators present their sessions based on their availability, and this provides teachers and coaches the opportunity to present professional development they have created.
So I want to share with you, this is an actual screenshot from our new learning management system where teachers would go register to attend professional development. And HCM, it's a novel acronym, but it simply stands for Human Capital Management. As a teacher, again, I have 5 professional development days. I can select based on the catalog and by searching through the online catalog which sessions that I want to attend, but we could walk through. So I may need a refresher. I might be new to Metro, so maybe I want an introduction to the balanced literacy components, and that would be provided. So we have that in our catalog. It's available. Again, this is a live screenshot from our current learning management platform. Then what we've also done in the Department of Curriculum Instruction is that we have started to differentiate and provide targeted levels. So for example, the teacher's next move after getting an overview of the balanced literacy components may want to go into more in depth on shared reading or interactive read aloud. So what we've done is we've created levels. So maybe you start at level 1 of interactive read aloud and shared reading, and then there would be a level 2 and perhaps a level 3. So maybe I want to look at small group instruction, and there would be a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. That way, principals, literacy coaches, teachers can work together to design a professional learning plan that meets their needs, depending on where they are, their years of experience. Are they new to Metro? Are they new to teaching, or both? But this is an actual screenshot that's currently available now, so teachers can go register for an introduction to balanced literacy. And then again, all those offerings that I have just talked about and Leah's talked about are repeatable. So every semester, including the summer, and as Leah said, we solicit input from other PD providers, whether they be teachers or literacy coaches, to augment and supplement our professional development offerings. But this is what's currently available this fall. And that, again, is on ci.mnps.org. If you want to go look through the catalog, it includes mathematics, science, STEAM, everything there, but a big emphasis on literacy, of course. Something on the agenda, Ms. Spearing, you wanted to talk a little bit about the Schools of Innovation and their plan, and we've got a couple of folks here from the Schools of Innovation. Should there be any questions, we have Audrey Corder and Heather Smith, as well as Natalie Gibbs, and then Chief Griffin over here. And we have been in conversations about our plan going forward and thinking about the work that they're doing in their schools to provide more intense supports. And Dr. Griffin and I are very much on the same page that we need to move to have closer alignment. I know that last year a decision was made to implement Core Knowledge Language Arts, CKLA. That was done in 2 ways. Again, that was done using available grant funds to purchase those materials, and also some of those schools are part of the study at FSU that are implementing the knowledge strand. You can see that CKLA here has 2 independent strands, or 2 separate strands rather. The skills strand, and then that teaches the foundational skills, including phonics and fluency, and then there's a knowledge building strand, the listening and learning that focuses on daily knowledge rich reading lessons. I can give you an update on where we are with CKLA, but it's better framed in the context that we are in an ELA adoption year, and we have been very intentional to include teachers from Schools of Innovation on that review committee, so that in the future, as we move towards implementing the same curriculum materials, that we're all on the same page and we're not doing separate things. That is our desire. That is a strong desire that I think is shared between my staff and Dr. Griffin's staff. But if there are any other questions for discussion, I'm happy to answer those, or we have others that can speak to the actual work that's going on in the schools.
I'm pleased to hear that there
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
coordination between what the students get in the district, as well as additional support in that area
Right.
for Schools of Innovation, so that they're not getting left behind. There's no gaps. They're getting the same type of instruction, but more support, and maybe more support for faculty if they need it in the Schools of Innovation.
Yes, ma'am.
So
More
thank
intensive
you.
support. And I would add, Ms. Spearing, that we've looked a lot at the mobility rate, not just with our students, which is at 30%, but also with our teachers and administrators. And we've got to be really consistent as an entire district that we're all going forward in the same direction. And again, that's something that Dr. Griffin and I, as we get to know each other and work more closely together, we both share that same goal.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions about Schools of Innovation? Okay, thank you.
And so, for the sake of time, I know we've got 8 minutes, Ms. Spearing, this is your meeting, but we wanted to just end our presentation about literacy, and then I know you have that assessment conversation that you would like for us to discuss given time. But going forward, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the expectations, so that by the time we receive an agenda, we're able to respond to it. And ideally, we would provide you with the materials Thursday before the Tuesday meeting as requested and discussed last Friday. So happy to do that. So going forward, whatever the Teaching and Learning Committee's topics are, we would like to provide an advance materials for you. But regardless of what those topics are, we are happy to use part of that meeting to give quarterly updates on our literacy priorities, some of our student data that we have available, update on the professional development that we have, and then how we're supporting our schools. So We serve at your pleasure if that's what you would like for us to do. That's just something that we suggested we are happy to provide.
I think that looks great to get those quarterly updates. And I had a few questions, and we may not, if there's no one, if we have a few minutes left at the end, we'll talk about any of the assessments. But so far, no board member has come forward with any
Sure.
questions. But how long does the literacy block last? Is that an hour and a half? Is that 90 minutes? How long is the literacy block in K2?
In the spring, the Curriculum Instruction Department and at that time, the EDCs, the executive directors, we collaborated over the course of about a month, and we had a series of meetings and email discussions, and we wanted to identify the minimum requirements. So the state in their RTI manual has provided some guidance. Funny thing, anecdotally, I would say that if you add up the minutes in the guidance document from the state, it exceeds 420 minutes, so it's actually not doable. So then you have to start to make some choices. We went with the idea that we would provide minimum requirements, that if you can get to this bar, great. That should be the minimum expectation. If you want to do more than that based on your students' needs or some of your other priorities within your school, you have some flexibility to do that. That document says 90 minutes is the minimum. We understand that most schools probably do the 120 minutes, but as a district, we said minimum 90 minutes.
And what would you say most schools are doing? 90 minutes? And is that, what I'm hearing is that the teachers are being told that they're supposed to do 45 minutes of phonics instruction.
No, I can just say, I'll just reiterate what Aaliyah said, that we said no more than 25% at any given time should be foundational skills, phonics being a part of the foundational skills work.
Okay.
So 25% of a 90-minute lesson would be, 22 and a half minutes.
And
so if
that's
they're
not
exceeding
in
that,
isolation.
never in isolation, no.
Yes, and it might be worthy of some time at the next training class that you have.
Yes, ma'am.
Because teachers are confused about that.
Okay.
And concerned about it. So if you can make that clear that they are not being required to spend 45 minutes in isolated phonics instruction, which is very different than what I'm hearing today, which is good news.
Right, so that's way too much time. I think we would all agree with that, and never in isolation. We would also agree with that. So we would thank you for charging us with the opportunity to clarify that. We'll be glad to do so.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions about Dr. Williams' presentation?
My only question, not so much about your presentation, but I know we've been getting a lot of chatter on Twitter about, or from some advocates, from some dyslexia advocates who want us to really beef up how we're supporting students with all kinds of needs around literacy. I don't know if this should be included in a future Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, or if you can speak to how we can better support the community in explaining what's happening in our schools or shift conversations, whatever that looks like.
I'm happy to prepare a presentation for a future meeting. That's, I think it's, your discretion, and we'll be happy to provide that. I would just remind us all in the room that what we just discussed refers to Tier 1 instruction. So not the interventions or any of maybe the dyslexia-specific interventions. But what we want to do is provide a thoughtful, balanced approach to literacy instruction that would be proactive and prevent students who are at risk for character dyslexia for having to go down that path and chase them. If we can catch them and provide strong instructional support preventatively, that's what our desire would be. And if those kids that need additional supports, we're able to provide that too once we've properly identified them.
Thank you. I love it.
All right, David, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Yes,
and this presentation was very helpful.
Good. Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Spear.
you. So we are adjourned, and we're going to meet in the back at 4:30? Right. Okay.
Correct?
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.